Okay, let's dive into a sexual phenomenon that, on the surface, seems to defy all logic. It challenges our deepest ideas about masculinity, relationships, and even evolution itself. But here's the thing. This isn't some fringe interest. It is a trend that is absolutely exploding in popularity right now. And when I say exploding, I am not kidding. Over just the last decade, internet searches for cuckolding have skyrocketed by an almost unbelievable 720%. This is not a slow burn, folks. This is a wildfire of curiosity and, well, desire, spreading across the entire digital world. And you might think, oh, people are just searching. But no, it's way more than that. The data from the world's biggest pornography sites consistently shows that cuckolding and its cousin, the Hotwife category, are among the fastest growing types of content out there. And it turns out, Americans are leading the pack on this one. So this brings us to the big question, right? From a biological standpoint, from a social standpoint, this really shouldn't be happening. So what in the world is going on? Why this and why now? Let's start piecing this puzzle together. All right, first up, we have to tackle the biggest contradiction head-on. The evolutionary paradox. Biology tells us this fantasy should be a man's absolute worst nightmare. I mean, the classic evolutionary argument is simple and it's powerful. A man's #1 biological job is to pass on his own genes. Raising another man's child is, from a purely genetic point of view, a total dead end. So you'd think evolution would have stomped out any interest in this ages ago. But here's a fascinating twist. Researchers like Dr. David Ley have a counter theory, and it's called sperm competition arousal. The idea is that deep down, on a primal level, men might actually be wired to get turned on by the threat of a rival. That arousal could trigger a more urgent, more vigorous sexual response, basically a biological panic button to outcompete the other guy's sperm. It's like an ancient instinct getting hijacked for modern fantasy. And get this isn't some rare biological quirk affecting a few people. A huge study by Dr. Justin Lehmiller found that a staggering 58% of men, that's a clear majority, have had this exact fantasy. This just proves it's not some niche kink. It is a widespread, even if it's unspoken, part of the male psyche. So, okay, evolution might explain the initial spark, but it doesn't explain the massive explosion we're seeing right now. For that, we need to look at what could be the single biggest driver of all, the absolute sea change in what it means to be a man today. Just think about it for a second. The old pillars of masculinity, being the sole provider, the ultimate protector, the exclusive sexual possessor, they've basically crumbled. In today's world, women are earning more degrees, they have more economic freedom, and they hold a lot more power in relationships. For a lot of men, this has created this deep underlying sense of confusion and anxiety. And this is where a really brilliant psychological judo move comes into play. When men feel like they're losing control in their lives, cuckolding offers a bizarre way to grab it back. They take that threatening feeling, that loss of power, and they orchestrate it. They turn it into a consensual, arousing game that they're in charge of. It's an incredible way to flip anxiety into intense pleasure. But these shifting social roles? That's only half the story. The next massive piece of the puzzle is technology, which didn't just make the fantasy more accessible, it fundamentally rewired the desire pathways for millions of people. Neuroscientists talk about something called the pornography feedback loop. Here's how it works. A guy stumbles across this kind of content online. Because it's taboo, because it's new, it triggers an unusually intense arousal. His brain then forges this really powerful link between this specific scenario and pleasure. The more he sees it, the stronger that connection gets, until the fantasy starts popping into his head all on its own. And it's not just pornography. Technology has built an entire ecosystem around this. You've got online communities giving men validation, showing them, hey, you're not alone. You've got forums offering step-by-step guidance on how to do this safely. Anonymity lets you explore without any social risk. And now, you've even got dating apps like Field that make finding a willing partner easier than ordering a pizza. Tech has basically torn down every single barrier. And this all leads us to a really crucial way of looking at this. The fact that BDSM culture has gone mainstream has given us the language to talk about what's really going on here. A consensual, deliberate exchange of power. Because really, at its core, that's what cuckolding often is, a form of psychological submission. The man is voluntarily, intentionally giving up his traditional, dominant role as the sole sexual owner. And that act of giving up control, it taps into the very same desires for power exchange and erotic humiliation that are central to BDSM. And look, research from experts like Dr. Peggy Kleinplatz backs this up. They found that far from being damaging, this kind of consensual power exchange can lead to some of the most profound and intense sexual experiences people have. That psychological thrill of safely surrendering control can create a level of arousal and connection that, let's be honest, vanilla sex often just can't touch. So let's recap. We have the evolutionary spark, we have the crisis of masculinity, we have the technological amplifier, and we have the BDSM framework. It's time to bring all these threads together to see the whole amazing picture. But before we tie this all up with a neat little bow, there is a huge dose of reality we need to talk about. Because while the fantasy is absolutely exploding, the number of people actually doing it is a totally different story. The gap between thinking about it and doing it is massive. So here's the crucial number. Remember that 58% of men fantasize about this? Well, researchers estimate that only about 2 to 8% of couples, let's just call it an average of 5%, ever actually engage in it. The conversion rate from fantasy to reality is incredibly low. So why the huge gap? Well, the reasons are pretty human when you think about it. The fantasy in your head is perfect, it's controllable. Real life is messy and unpredictable. The emotional reality of jealousy is a very, very real thing. A lot of the time, a partner just isn't interested. And for many men, the fantasy itself is enough. It gives them the thrill without any of the real-world risk. So here's how it all clicks together in this perfect storm. You've got evolution, which repurposed an ancient arousal trigger. You've got the masculinity crisis, which reframes a loss of control as a source of pleasure. You have technology, which completely normalized the taboo. And finally, BDSM culture came along and provided the psychological framework to understand it all. It's not one thing. It's all of these powerful forces converging at the exact same time. So after digging through all these complex drivers, what is the ultimate takeaway from the experts who are actually studying this stuff? It boils down to this really clear, non-judgmental message. If you have this fantasy, you are part of a majority. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're abnormal. But, and this part is key, just because you have a fantasy doesn't mean you are obligated to act on it. Fantasy and reality can and often should serve very different purposes in our lives. Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question. Is this whole explosion of interest just a temporary cultural fad, a weird symptom of our very unique time? Or are we actually witnessing a fundamental and permanent shift in the future of human desire itself?